The snowman had been built the day before, on the 20th of November 2025, by drivers trapped for hours in the heavy traffic jams on the A171 after the sudden, intense snowfall brought everything to a standstill. What began as a small, half-serious attempt to pass the time turned strangely meaningful as more stranded motorists joined in. Someone sculpted the base with their boots, another shaped the middle, a child rolled the head across the snow-packed tarmac, and a delivery driver placed a road cone on top for safety, triggering laughter up and down the frozen line of cars. Someone sacrificed a spare jumper and wrapped it around the snowman like a scarf. Another stuck a carrot from their packed lunch into its face. For a moment, the frustration of the storm softened, replaced by a sense of camaraderie between strangers forced into the same frozen pause. When the road crews finally arrived later that evening and cleared a path, they chose not to destroy the snowman. Instead, with unusual care for something made of ice, they relocated it onto the roadside embankment. Drivers stuck behind headlights and hazard lights cheered as the figure was lifted and placed gently on the verge. By nightfall, the snowman stood alone beside the A171, watching over the still struggling traffic. Its cone head leaning slightly forward, as if aware of the responsibility it had unintentionally inherited. The day began with a brittle cold that crept across Yorkshire before sunrise, a sharpness that seemed to freeze the air itself. Even the wind sounded stiff, cutting through the moors with a thin, metallic whistle. In Whitby, thermometers hovered around -4 degrees Celsius by 7 a.m. A little farther inland, near Gisborough and the elevated sections of the A171, the cold was deeper, closer to -8 degrees Celsius. The high moorland plateau carried a stillness that felt ancient, the kind of silence only winter can command. Cars moved cautiously along the newly reopened roads. Drivers glanced at the snowman as they passed, a quick smile, a raised gloved hand, a moment of recognition for the figure that had become the storm's accidental mascot. Its pebble eyes stared outwards, unblinking and dark against the morning light. Frost had hardened across its face during the night, giving it a crystalline sheen that caught the pale sunrise. Beyond the road, the moors rolled in long, undisturbed fields of white. Wine-shaped dunes rippled across the heather, burying the deep purple shrubs beneath solid layers of compacted snow. Footprints from the previous day were already gone, smoothed over by the wind. Birds moved slowly, wings beating heavily against the frigid air, and the occasional cry of a distant crow echoed strangely, as though the landscape swallowed sound. In Scarborough, the seafront awoke under a layered patchwork of slush, frost, and half-melted snow. The beach, typically alive with movement even in cold months, looked surreal under the winter's grip. Ribbons of white extended across the sand where snow had fallen and frozen before the tide had a chance to wash it away. The North Sea churned with slow, heavy waves, as if burdened by the cold, each crest rolling under a pale, dim sky. Shops along the harbor opened later than usual. Cafe owners swept their doorsteps, clearing ice in broad strokes that created sharp scraping sounds across the stone. Fishermen walking toward the docks left deep footprints in the snow, their heavy coats dusted with frost. A delivery van slipped briefly on an untreated patch of road, prompting pedestrians to jump back, but the driver regained control with a relieved sigh. School buses made their rounds at reduced speed. Children waited in clusters, hopping from foot to stay warm, their breath hanging in the air like smoke. Hats, scarves, mittens, layers upon layers, gave the morning a colorful contrast against the gray sky. Farther north, the situation in Scotland remained harsher. In Aberdeen, the cold had set its teeth into the city overnight. Pavements glittered with a treacherous, glassy sheen. Cars parked along Great Northern Road were shrouded in thick white coats, their windshields obscured by layers of ice patterns that looked almost artistic in the morning light. Residents scraped frost from windows with hurried, rhythmic motions, some blowing warm breaths onto the glass to soften the stubborn layers. Even gridded roads required care. Buses moved in long, slow arcs, braking gently to avoid sliding. Footpaths around schools and hospitals had been cleared, but many residential streets remained difficult to navigate. People walked carefully, eyeing each step with suspicion. Further west, into the highlands near Altnahara and Loch Glascarnock, the snow retained its grip more fiercely. Reports from the night indicated temperatures dipping close to -12 degrees Celsius in exposed glens, The 7 to 9 centimeters of snowfall the region had received had frozen into a dense, crunchy layer. Tree branches sagged under the weight of accumulated frost, and the wind moving through them produced a faint tinkling sound like chimes. Small communities in the highlands woke slowly. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, rising into the icy morning air in long vertical ribbons. Farmers checked water troughs for ice, raking frozen surfaces with heavy tools. Sheep huddled close together in sheltered corners, their wool dusted with white. In Wales, the landscape around Lake Fernway shone beneath the morning light, wrapped in 7 centimeters of hardened snow. The forest near the lake was quiet, branches bending gently beneath their icy load. Birds stayed close to the trunks, where the wind was less biting. The lake's surface, warmer than the air, released a soft fog that drifted low and slow, weaving through the trees like something alive. Farmers in Powys used tractors to carve paths between barns and open grazing fields. The engines growled through the cold, the exhaust steaming in thick plumes that blended with the fog rising from the lake. Cattle moved carefully, their hooves punching into the frozen ground with dull, hollow thuds. On the Shetland Islands, Lerwick woke to another morning of frosted rooftops and icy pavements. Though the snow depth had been lighter than elsewhere, around 5 centimeters, the wind chill made the cold feel more brutal. Fishing boats swayed at the docks, their ropes stiff with frost. Crew members moved slowly, clearing ice from the decks with heavy tools. The sea roared beyond the harbor, gray and restless. Back on the A171, the snowman remained the one piece of the previous day that seemed untouched by time. Its cone had leaned slightly more than before, pushed by the night wind, and its scarf fluttered gently when small gusts cut through the moors. Despite the thaw attempts of midday sun, the snowman remained solid, strengthened by the cold's return. By late morning, the roads through the moors carried a steady stream of traffic. Vehicles moved carefully but smoothly now. Drivers who had spent the previous day stuck in the bitter cold seemed more alert, more respectful of the conditions. A sense of caution had settled into the region, not fear, but awareness. Shops in Whitby and Gisborough reported increased sales of salt, shovels, torches, blankets, windscreen icers, and winter boots. It seemed the storm had reminded people of winter's unpredictability. Conversations in queues naturally drifted toward travel stories. Whose car had skidded, which hill was impossible, who had pushed whose vehicle out of a drift. And, more often than not, someone brought up the snowman. It's still there, I saw it this morning. They should keep it, a landmark. It's become part of the road. Even radio hosts mentioned it, turning the snowman into something of a local celebrity. A BBC Tees presenter joked that he should get his own postcode. At midday, the sun broke through the cloud cover briefly, casting long shadows over the moorland ridges. The sky brightened, revealing soft tones of winter blue, but the warmth stayed hidden. The weak sunlight only softened the topmost layers of snow before disappearing behind another wave of gray. In Scarborough, more people ventured out as the day progressed. Children pulled sleds along the gentle slopes near Falsgrave Park. A group of teenagers built snow forts along the beach, mixing sand and snow into strange, gritty battlements. Seagulls, confused by the unfamiliar white ground, circled cautiously, unsure where to land. Evening approached early, as it often does in late November. By 4 p.m. the sky darkened into muted blues and purples. The temperature began its slow descent once again. Puddles that had thawed slightly during the day hardened quickly into thin plates of ice. Streets that had seemed safe an hour before became risky again. The UK braced for another night of deep cold. Across Scotland, yellow ice warnings returned. In Aberdeen, authorities issued advice for people traveling after dark. In the Highlands, the snow gates remained shut in several areas. In Wales, gritters redeployed across major roads. In North Yorkshire, the A169 and high sections of the A171 were monitored closely, ready for possible evening closures. Near the moors, the snowman faced the fall in temperature silently. Frost began creeping across its surface again, forming delicate star-shaped crystals on its scarf and around the edges of its base. The carrot nose stiffened, its color deepening under the cold. The cone had froze in place. Night fell. Headlights passed intermittently, throwing beams of white and gold across the snowman's face. Each time a car drove by, shadows shifted across the moorland, stretching long and thin across the snow. The wind picked up but not violently, just firm enough to make the branches rustle and the heather whisper beneath the frozen layers. Further into the night, the moon broke through the clouds. It cast a silver path across the moors, outlining every ridge and drift with a cold glow. The snowman shone faintly under the moonlight, its edges softened by the surrounding white. Across Yorkshire, households settled into the night, fireplaces crackled in living rooms. Electric heaters hummed quietly, windscreens were covered to protect them from the frost. Weather forecasts played in the background of living rooms, warning of more low temperatures, possible icy patches, and isolated flurries of snow moving in from the northeast. And somewhere along the A171, the snowman, built accidentally by a roadside community of stranded strangers, stood motionless, as if keeping watch over the moors and the long stretch of frozen road. Through the night, the cold settled deeper into the land, sinking into the soil, the roads, the walls of houses, even into the breath of those who ventured outside. The first great freeze of the season was no longer just a passing weather event. It had become a presence, something that existed alongside people as tangibly as fog or wind. It shaped the sounds of the night, muted the usual rustle of leaves, thickened the air, and drew long frost lines across every surface. In the small hours of the morning, long before daylight threatened to return, a faint glow rose above the horizon. It wasn't sunlight. It was the soft orange pulse of gritters moving slowly along the A171 and its neighboring roads. Their amber lights swept rhythmically across the moors, painting strokes of color on the snow. The vehicles crawled through the landscape like glowing insects, methodical and patient. Drivers leaned forward in their seats, scanning the road for black ice and drifts. As one gritter approached the familiar bend where the snowman stood, the driver slowed instinctively. The snowman, illuminated by the rotating lights, appeared to shift with every pass of brightness, sometimes looking amused, sometimes grave, sometimes oddly wise in its frozen silence. The driver smiled, shaking his head as he passed. "Still there, tough little fella," he murmured to himself, and the engine hummed onward into the night. The early morning hours were always the coldest. By 5 a.m. the temperature across the moors had dropped nearly -10 degrees Celsius. Thin feathers of frost etched themselves onto windshields. The ground crackled underfoot.